All right. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Curiosity Theory Hangout. Thanks for hanging out with us. My name is Martin Lopez. I wrote a book called The Curiosity Theory, and we're super excited to be hanging out with you guys today. My guest today is Coach Khan, and we're going to bring him in just a minute. But the topic, let's talk about that really quick. So the topic is how to apply, how to use curiosity to boost performance and improve results. Now, my thought is, I've always been doing that. I've always been curious. I've always wondered how I could, boost my results. How can I improve my performance? I've been in sales pretty much my whole life. I started as a DJ when I was 15 years old, so I'd have to go out and get gigs as a DJ, and then I became a real estate agent at the age of 19 years old. So I was out selling houses, selling real estate at the age of 19. So I've been selling my whole life, really. I've been selling my whole life. And one of the things I've always tried to do is like, how can I get better? How can I get better at sales? And then that translated to how can I get better at my relationships? How can I be better with friends? How can I be better in my personal, my love relationships with my family, with my friends, all that stuff, right? So when I found when I did that, that translated over to my professional business, and then the results. Once I discovered curiosity, those results just they just blew up. So today we are going to share some time with Coach Khan. He's going to tell you a little bit about himself. I met him through a couple friends, and I'm super excited to talk to him because what he brings to a conversation is so rich. And how I approach this conversation, how I usually approach every Curiosity Theory Hangout is I'm learning. I'm here to learn. I have my ways that I try to boost my performance from the books I read, the journaling I do, my meditation, my exercise, all those things. Those are all designed to boost my performance, to make me a better human being, to make me the best version of myself. But what I found and what I find, and I talked about it this week in a video, so if you want to go back to my Facebook page and look at a video, what I find is if I have conversations with other people, then I get to start to have how they think, and I can implement that into how I think. So real quick, before we bring Coach Khan on, I want to tell you a little bit about what people said this week on as a response to a question I asked. So the question I asked a few days ago was, how do you apply curiosity to boost performance and improve results? And Richard Garden said, curiosity prompts me to continue to seek knowledge and consistently improve my skills. That's awesome. So seeking knowledge and improving skills, and then applying these new skills, he's able to provide more value to his clients. So thank you for that, Richard. Tim Rode said, I get out in nature and I get my heart rate elevated. I get real and I ask questions. And this seems to be a trick for curiosity, creativity, and eventually amazing wizard-like results. I love that. Danny Levin said, many believe that their job is to answer questions. I believe my job is to question answers. That's brilliant, right? Some awesome stuff. Brandon Bruno said, in leaning into triggers as opposed to resisting and choosing to stay stuck. That's awesome. Jack Cohen said, business performance implies some kind of metric or benchmark. I work with Jack Cohen, and he's always throwing to me kind of like the stuff that you get out of textbooks, and bringing that into our conversation so that I'm more curious in the fundamentals and actually all the ins and outs of actually running a company. So I love that. So thanks, Jack. You're always pushing me that way. Bill Sturley, who's also been on the show, curiosity is the gateway emotion to empathy and compassion. I love it. I love it. So, and then last but not least, Susan Jager Adams said, I always explore a different angle and invite others into that journey. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite Coach Khan into this journey, and we're going to talk about applying curiosity to boost human performance and improve results. Coach Khan, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Martin. How are you this morning?
Oh, super excited, super happy, and grateful that you're here. So before we kind of jump into the topic of, boosting human performance and improving results, how about telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Glad to. A little bit about me. I am probably 25, 30 years of experience in training and development, coaching, performance improvement, and a lot of organizational development pieces. I've worked throughout my career in a lot of the Fortune 500 companies, but the most recent years, the last 10 years almost, I've been working. I have a boutique consulting firm by the name of
Hmm.
Fresh Biz Solutions, where I'm able to support a lot of the efforts that my clients have towards their goals, either individually for the executives or for the organization as a whole. And I provide a lot of those consultative approaches, the workshops that they need, the coaching that they need in order to be able to really unleash the true potential of their people. My background is also in human performance technology, which makes this such a fun discussion for me.
Well, I love that. Let's talk a little bit about human performance technology. How did you get into that?
Um, Probably 15 or more years ago, a lot of the work that we were doing in the HR sphere and the learning and development sphere, we were
Mhm.
looking at it and trying to approach the solutions that we were providing from a different way. We started looking at beyond just training as in a way to really impact performance. And we started looking at more integrated performance solutions. So we took a page out of the work that was already being done with total quality management and manufacturing and production.
Yeah.
And instead of widgets, we started looking at how could that apply to people. So we looked at a lot of the ways that how can we impact people's performance beyond beyond just the obvious stuff. I'll give you a quick example, if I may.
Yeah, please.
There's a
Yeah.
lot of things that we look at, and we say, okay, I had a client that asked me to come in, and since you mentioned sales earlier, he said, I'm struggling because my people aren't selling the new product that we just promoted, that we just rolled out. I said, okay, what's going on? Tell me a little bit more. He says, they're just not selling. We rolled out this wonderful new product. The feedback that we got from our focus groups has been great, but they're just not selling it. I said, okay,
Yeah.
so what can we do? What are you thinking? So I asked some questions. He says, well, why don't you come in and do a sales training workshop like you did last year? I said, well, we did the workshop last year. And the results were positive. People went out and they improved their sales numbers and everything else. Coming back and doing the same thing, I don't think that's the issue because I don't think they forgot how to sell over the last year. Well, why don't you come in and do a refresher for them? I said, okay, but I'm still not convinced that that's the problem. So we went in and we started digging. I said, were they able to sell before the rollout? He said, yeah, they've been doing great and they're still selling the old product well. So I went in and I looked a little bit more. Well, the problem was that they hadn't bothered to change the incentive plan. Well, as a
Mm.
salesperson, you know that what you get incentivized on is what you're going to promote. So all we had to do rather than just train was look at the systems, look at what was surrounding
Yeah.
that performance and say, okay, maybe what we need to do is change the incentive. And the minute we did that, along with a little bit of a refresher and a reminder to some of these folks, they were off into the races. So human performance technology takes a look at things and really looks at all of the elements because performance is tied to three key areas. One is organizationally. Are we set up? Do we have the right people on the right seat on the bus? The second thing is, do we have the right processes in place? I mean, because a good person in a bad system, the system will win every time. And the third piece of this is, do my people have the skills and are they willing to use those skills? So people, process, and organizational setup make up that trifecta in order to get to performance.
I love that. So you brought up something that I've read about and I'm real curious about, like incentives. Like, so we're dealing with incentives for people.
Mhm.
What percentage of people out there do you find actually are inspired or actually are motivated by incentives?
Well, it depends on the incentive. Most people think
Mhm.
of incentives as purely money. And
Okay. Thank you.
money, I'm not saying that money isn't a good incentive for people, especially when they're looking to make a living from this piece. But we have
Mhm.
to remember that all things being equal, if I feel like I'm being equitably compensated in my job, if I feel all things are being relatively even and fair, money is not the primary factor. It probably doesn't even crack the top five. Appreciation, gratitude for what we're doing, looking at people and giving them clear direction, the opportunity to grow their career or feel like they're part of a team. These are factors that really incentivize people to move in the right direction. So when we're trying to make change happen through the work that we do, because at the end of the day, performance improvement is all about making positive changes.
Yeah, absolutely.
We look at that and we try to figure out how can we make the connection for people so they understand what's in it for them.
Yeah.
What is really going to make the difference for them personally?
That's awesome. So that would lead me to believe that if let's say you have a leadership team of 14 people or something, you're
Mhm,
going to have 14 different personalities. You're going to have
mhm,
the CFO, the CEOs, the chairman of the board. You're going to have all these other people as well,
mhm.
different personalities, different needs, different motivations. How do you isolate? How do you figure out what motivates what person, and how do you implement those things and keep those things going? Like you said, we use something called a needs list, and some people are, I would say, they're like you said that they're
Mhm.
motivated by being appreciated, maybe acceptance, maybe being included, maybe they're motivated by being challenged, maybe they want to inspire, maybe they want to lead. So you have all
Mhm.
these different motivations of people. How do you manage that, when you have so many people and then all the people that they manage?
Well, let's go to the heart of what this talk is all about: curiosity.
Yeah.
It starts
Yeah.
with questions. I mean, if you want to get to the heart of it, you ask questions. That does two things. One is hopefully it starts the dialogue so you can dig into the real reasons behind how people are motivated and why. But it also shows them that you really care about the person.
Yeah.
You mentioned something earlier that caught my attention in your introduction. I mean, when I look at curiosity, curiosity is about asking questions, just like you said. But when I ask questions, when I sit here with you, Martin, and I ask questions, how are you? What's going on? What's important to you in your life? What pisses you off? I mean, what are those things that really make you tick? At the end of the
Yeah.
day, I'm showing that I care. If I'm sincere about my questions, I'm showing that I care. If I care, I'm starting to build a relationship. Now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah. So I love that, because what I share and when I teach curiosity, I said, the empathy, empathy, listening, focusing on another person versus yourself.
Mhm.
People feel connected with, they feel heard, they feel
Right.
appreciated. They're going to experience a lot of the needs that they have themselves that we might not know that we're giving those needs. We're facilitating those needs.
Yeah.
So we may say something to somebody in passing and it shows up for them as appreciation. And yes, we were appreciating, but we may not have known the depth of that. If we can listen and we can watch how we interact with people, then we go, oh, look at John, Samantha, they really like appreciation. That's really, really important. Kind of like a love language, right?
It is. It is. For many people, that is. And that's how they perceive that appreciation, that love, that connection
Mm,
with others. So, all of these things are extremely important in the relationships that we build, whether you are a leader with your team, whether you are a team member with your peers, with your organization, and in your personal lives. I mean, some of the things that we look at when I coach executives now, Martin, one of the things that I look at is we go through that curiosity piece. We ask the questions because there is no way for that person to be able to be successful in their performance in their job if their home life is not in a good place, their
yes,
personal
that's
life.
brilliant.
So instead of coaching them on work life balance over the last year, especially with COVID, I've transitioned into a place where now I'm coaching people on work life integration. And we're dealing with all of the aspects of them, the complete person. None of us have those clear boundaries anymore where our job starts at this time and ends at this time. For most of us, especially if you are in a position where you have to work from home, those boundaries are really blurred now. And you're
Yeah.
looking at it saying, okay, how do I make this work? Because you know what? At some point, I may have to get up from my computer and go help the kids with their homework, or make sure that I'm teacher, or I have to put another load in the dishwasher or the
Mm.
or the washing machine. But it's okay because you know what? I'll make up that time at night. These are things now where our life is getting so blurry with between the lines of personal and professional. Nowhere in the recent history has it been this way.
I love that. And I look at my own life as a loan officer,
Mhm,
that I'll start my morning. I have a morning routine. So I start my morning. I do that. I get going around 7:30, 8 o'clock. I get going.
mhm,
And then somewhere, 'cause I work at my house. I also have an office, but most of the time I work at my house. So if I'm here working, that there's other things that have to happen around the house, and I live by myself. I got to do things around the house. And then if my
Right.
son calls, he needs a ride, he needs all that. You got to start to integrate those things. And then I find that my work takes me deeper into the afternoon, evening, but I'm less worn out.
Yep.
And
And
is that because of
that's a
the
big,
integration?
and that's a big part of it. But it's giving yourself permission to integrate as well. For a lot of
Mm,
people, the fatigue seems to set in two ways. One is the physical piece because they don't know when to shut it off, so they're constantly
yeah,
working, and they don't plan that time to really regenerate and recover.
yeah.
It's like an athlete, because part of what I do as a coach is I don't just coach executives, I coach athletes. And in many
Okay.
ways, I look at it the same way. There's a point of peak performance and there's a point of recovery. You can't play back to back to back to back games all the time and try to be at 100% plus. So, what we're looking for in this kind of a situation is the peaks and valleys. Allow yourself the time to execute, to sprint, to make that race, and then to recover and jog back. Does that make sense?
I love
And
that. Yeah,
therefore, we have to.
absolutely.
But the other part of that, Martin, as well, is that, so emotionally it's one thing, but physically is the other part. So both of those, giving yourself permission. So many of us are stressed because we look and say, okay, I got to get this done, or we can't focus for those stretches of time that we need to get results.
I love that. I'm going to kind of segue around that because you prompted me to a question that I've had for quite some time. So I have a friend of mine, Wilman Morcio. He's come on the show many times. He was a professional soccer player, a collegiate soccer player. He also teaches, right? He coaches right now at a very high level,
Mhm.
and his style is to hit what what he does is he brings that professional athlete style, that hunger, that drive to professionals, to CEOs, to leadership teams and stuff.
Mhm.
I'm real interested in how you integrate like a pro style, if you even do that. How do you integrate a professional athlete style into like a leadership CEO, kind of board of directors, HR? How do you do that, or do you even do that?
Actually, I do, and it's interesting that you say that. I work with a lot of youth, student athletes, and everything else. So I work everything from inner city kids that are trying to stay out of trouble,
Uh-huh.
to club, to varsity at high school, to the Olympic Development Program for Colorado. So I've been involved
Awesome.
at the highest levels of a lot of the training and development, the coaching piece. One of the big benefits of being able to do that is I switch between the two. So there are stories that I bring from the kids, from the things that we've applied, from the tools that I've used with them to my executives. For example, I had an
Yeah.
executive not too long ago. He was very frustrated and upset. As a CEO, he expected that just because he put out a communication, that everybody would just jump to that and that everybody would respond, no questions asked. So he's
Mhm.
using an old school command and control approach to his leadership piece. And in an effort to try to communicate, to break through to him about his communication style and how he was going about it, I touched on a simple fact. I said, when I work with the kids as young as 10 or even younger, and I asked them, what makes a good pass? Because it's an essential part of working together as a team, passing the ball from one to the other to move it down the field. I said, what makes a
Yeah.
good pass? I said, inevitably, the kids will turn around and tell me, Coach, a good pass is when I can get the ball to my teammate and he or she can do something with it. So I said, take that into our discussion. I said, you as a leader now have done the proverbial, I just kicked the ball down the field. I didn't even look. Was there anybody there to receive it? And did they get it? And could they do something with it? Just
Mm.
because you put that communication out there once does not make it effective communication. There was nobody
It
on the
does. Yeah.
receiving end.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
And
these
did
are
you
the
have
kind of,
buy-in, right? And all
yeah,
those other things.
because
Keep
all of a
going.
sudden, yeah, all of a sudden it just he goes, oh, I get it. So I'm playing by
Yeah.
myself here. I'm not even looking at my teammates. I'm not even setting them up for success. I said yes,
Mm.
because communication, like a game, like playing on a team, it's a team sport. You got to work together with that kind of stuff.
I love it. And what I heard you do is be curious. You created, well, you had an idea and you applied it to him so that he could be curious about that question,
Yeah.
so that he could actually, and that which then he's not defensive. Well, and that happens to everybody. Like if we just like this guy, if he's just command and control, then our job is to follow your leader, like like we're robots. And at some point we may decide not to do that. And I think often we decide not to do that. And that's probably why 70% of the people in the workforce are not productive. I would assume that there's a connection in there. But when you did what you did, you applied curiosity in a way that you communicated with him, I would assume, and that's what it sounds like you're doing, at least from my perspective. And then he then hears that and then considers. So he's then being curious, he's considering, and then his defenses drop. And that's what happens with people when we apply use curiosity.
Correct. And that's a mindset thing. And part of what we work on with the executives is adjusting their mindset. Let me get into a little bit more of a technical piece from that perspective.
Yes, please.
When you look at it, a curious mind is directly correlated with a desire to learn, a desire to grow. So when you have a learning mindset, a growth mindset, that is a key indicator for leadership potential. So when I work with companies, when I consult with the C-suite about who's going to be the next leader, who's going to be promoted, who are we looking at as a high potential, a big part of that, one of the areas that we look at is their growth mindset. Hence, backing up to that, how curious are they? What kind of questions do they are? How do they reach out to others? How willing are they to collaborate or to ask questions and to learn? When we do study after study right now, the biggest relationship to that with the growth mindset as we go into this next evolution, this next normal, is our ability to learn a new skill, unlearn, and then relearn. You can't do those things without a growth mindset and a curiosity about things. These are fundamental pieces.
God, I love that.
As a leader, if I'm going to go ahead and lead, part of what I need to be able to do is be able to ask why and define the why for others. As a good leader, what separates me from an average leader is my ability to create more leaders, meaning I need to create more people with curiosity behind me that are going to also ask why. Too many times I go into organizations, and when they're trying to improve their performance, one of the phrases that I hear all the time is, "Oh, we can't do that because this is the way we've always done things." That's
right.
That's a fixed mindset. That's a mindset that says, "I know everything, I'm not changing." Many adults have that because as we get older, we are uncomfortable not knowing, not having all the answers. And that's a big part of what curiosity is, the curiosity theory that you espouse, that you communicate, what I use in my coachings. It's all about being able to be curious, to want to learn. If you want to learn, you will want to grow. If you stop asking questions, if you stop being curious, you've obtained that fixed mindset. You stop growing. You start getting fragile and brittle, and that's when the defensiveness comes up. That's when I know everything. I don't question my authority. And now we get into that place where we are very uncomfortable. But adults have to work on that. Kids come naturally because they're like sponges. They want to soak up everything. But for adults, we have to try to maintain that perspective. So
I love it.
It's important for us to stay curious.
I love that. You said a curious mind is, can you repeat that again? You said a curious mind is
a mind that wants to grow, that has a growth mindset to it. And that's why we want to continue that, because when we stop growing, that's a problem. That's when we start getting old.
That's awesome. Let's take a quick 30-second break. We'll be right back.
A curious nature allows to break down barriers and conflict.
I feel that I'm walking out of here and taking my business to the next level.
What this helped me with was how to put a structure around, like my sales calls, when I'm listening to someone, how to really separate what they're saying, the meaning of what they're saying, what their needs are versus like what my needs are.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach Khan, for being here. I really, really love this conversation. It's so rich. And real quick, I just retitled my book and I want to share with you the name of that book. It's right here. It's called The Curiosity Theory. I started it. Let me show you. When I first wrote the book, I wrote the book, The Curiosity Theory, A Path from Conflict to Resolution. And I like that title. I liked it a lot. And I believe curiosity is a path from conflict to resolution. And as I was coaching, as I was teaching, what I found is that curiosity is the secret to solving all of life's communication problems.
I could see that, because again, why do conflicts happen? A lot of times it's because simply my desires or my intent is different than yours a lot of times. But most of us, we judge ourselves by our intentions, right? Other people judge us by our actions. And those are two different perspectives. As we look at that, if you don't ask me, you won't know. You're going to make the assumptions based on what you see from one side. I'm going to make assumptions from the other side. And it's very difficult for us without that curiosity, without questioning. We make those assumptions, and then all of a sudden we get hardened into our positions. And that's part of what creates those conflicts, even amongst the closest of relationships.
I'm going to think about that. That's said so well, because it doesn't matter if it's my mom, if it's my girlfriend, if it's my brother, if it's somebody I work with. All relationships are affected by the way that we communicate. Are we being curious? Are we attacking? Are we being open? It's really the way it is. And it's the way that we are as human beings.
Correct. We're not an island. We're not mind readers either. So we have to be able to communicate. Well, one of the fundamental ways of communicating is asking questions, being curious, framing things, active listening. There's a big difference between these areas. When I do a lot of my classes, a lot of my workshops, I explain to people listening and hearing are two different things. When I do this, people will hear that. That's the physiological response that happens from the outside world to my ears. I don't control that. It just happens. As long as my hearing is there, I can hear that. However, listening involves the space between my ears. It's an active process. Yeah. It's me being able to ask questions, to clarify, to understand. And it's not just me listening to respond and to rebut and to say, I got you, Martin. Now I caught you in one of those traps. No, it's really listening to understand. It's listening to be able to say, okay, I get it. I can see where Martin's coming from for that one. Yeah. And now all of a sudden, I've grown. My mind has grown a little bit more. I've added another piece to this. It's expanded my world a little bit. And that's what curiosity does. It grows our world. It allows us to move beyond our current boundaries that we've already set for ourselves. That's what growth is. And that growth can lead to performance when we harness that appropriately. If an athlete that I work with isn't curious, he or she doesn't want to get better.
Yeah.
My most successful athletes, my high performing ones, always ask questions during the session, after the session. And it applies to the same thing to the executives that I work with. They're always asking questions. How can I do this better?
Yeah, and it becomes a muscle. So then curiosity then becomes a muscle. And what I heard you say, and how I look at it, is when you did the clap, I do the clap. I call that the phenomenon of curiosity. That's an external trigger that triggers curiosity. And so now I'm influenced by something external. When I'm doing what you were talking about, when I'm building the muscles, when I'm asking questions, when I'm seeking information, that's an internal version of curiosity. And as I get the reward for that, as I learn, as I develop, as I grow, as I celebrate, as I do all the different things that come along with it, because what comes along with curiosity, there's so much that comes along with it, because you're not defensive, so everything is I'd say mostly positive inputs. Even the negativity, because you're not in that reptilian or that limbic brain, that what shows up is facts. Okay, well, that's like, I'm not about that one, so let me move that one over here. And then I feel better about how I can work through problems, how I can think. So then that's a boost, right? So I like that. And what I'm hearing you're talking about is the internal version of curiosity, not the external, not the phenomenon of curiosity, but the act, the power of curiosity, the power of asking questions, the power of being curious.
Correct. And to your point, let's talk about that from that physiological part from the brain as well.
Mhm.
I mean, our early parts of our brain, the reptilian, the animal part of our brain that we talk about, the less developed, the old brain, if you will, that's just going to react. That's how animals are. If I
Yeah.
go into the woods, I'm in Colorado. Let's say I'm right in here in the shadow of the Rockies. If I go up to the national park there, and I come across a deer or an elk, it's not going to sit there and be curious and say, does Coach Khan want to eat me? Does he want to be my friend? What does he want to do? No, it sees me. It's going to react. It's going to bolt.
No doubt.
But people have the capacity. Part of what separates us from animals is our ability to stretch that from the moment of trigger to our response. We can stretch that out. We can be curious and ask questions. Why did Martin say that? Why did he
Yeah.
ask me that? Why did he look at me that way?
Yeah.
What is it that's going on? And I can ask questions. I can process that a little bit more. And that's part of where, again, we're working at a higher functions now.
I love that. And you can start to ask questions like, why am I responding that way? Why am I getting this feeling? Why am I triggered? Why am I now in a conflict? Why, how am I like less motivated out of what just happened? And how does that, how am I showing up?
Correct.
You just keep, it's endless. And I was coaching somebody the other day, and what he did is he came up with one solution. He had one solution. And he was really had a lot of anxiety because he had one solution to his challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, what happens if you try coming up with multiple solutions? Like, just give me like 5 different things you can do. And as soon as he had the 5 things, or actually just 2 things, you could immediately see the anxiety drop. 3 things, the anxiety dropped more. 4 things, the anxiety dropped even more. 5 things, he was now living in possibility. He was now living from a different part of his brain. And let's talk a little bit more about what happened. If you can tell me what happened in the person's brain when that was going on.
Well, all of a sudden now it's shifting. We're stopping our fear-based response, which is part of what triggers that anxiety. And in a fear-based response, we typically respond in one of 3 ways. We either start feeling like a victim and we start getting down and start stomping our feet and saying, why is this happening to me?
Yeah.
And we get into that panic mode from there, and we get really upset.
Yeah.
Or we get into that more aggressive critic mode where I'm saying, well, that's never going to work. We start shutting down from that piece, and we start criticizing any response, any idea that anybody has, or any question that anybody. That's the stupidest thing I've heard.
So let me interrupt you real quick on that, because what you did was exactly the opposite, right? Because when it comes to coming up with something negative, we can come up with that stuff in spades. I mean, if I asked him, hey, why don't you come up with something that was terrible that's going to happen to you as a result of this? Oh, he'd just start naming the things off. I mean, how many I could take my shoes off and start using my toes to count. And it was so amazing how when you just said what you said, it was so easy to come up with all the negative stuff, because that's just here. That's at the tip of our tongue.
Yep.
That's ready to go. That's just where we're at as human beings. We're just ready to just blast all that out, aren't we?
Yeah, because that's our fear response. Yeah, and that's our fear response. And a third one that we typically see with a lot of the people that we work with is the deer in the headlights, the bystander response. And it's people that are just frozen in fear, and they look at it and they say, okay, I'm just going to wait till Martin comes up with an idea, and I'm just going to wait here. So
in coaching or in everywhere?
Everywhere, whether it's coaching, whether it's in change management, whether it's now working with people through the pandemic period right now, and how to deal with that. I'm a co-author of a book titled The 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis. And I wrote that with a dear friend of mine, Dr. Ilya Grigoris. And this is part of what we incorporated in there, because part of that is really helping people assess their fear-based responses and how to deal with that at times of crisis. And sometimes that crisis might be a worldwide pandemic. It might be the situations that we're dealing with. But tomorrow, it might be the loss of a job. It might be something that happens in my personal life. A crisis is a very personal thing. So think about it. What triggers you to become either a victim, a critic, or a bystander, because those three are that fight, flight, and freeze response that we talk about. The fourth one that we talk about in the book, and part of what I've been working on with my clients in coaching and in training, is the navigator mode. A navigator is basically somebody who looks at that, recognizes the danger, but addresses the danger, doesn't allow the fear-based response to get into that. Looks at it and says, okay, how am I feeling? Why am I triggered this way? Ask those curiosity questions to get to that. Asks other people around them, how are you feeling? What's going on? Are you seeing the same thing that I'm seeing? And that allows them then to kind of tap into what they already know in a productive way, or what others know from their team, and then start working individually and collectively to get beyond that, to be able to make progress and start moving in the right direction. Because that's when we start regaining some of our control and that anxiety starts going down.
I love it. What a rich conversation. Coach Khan, I really appreciate you jumping on. And I had Dr. Ilya on before, and I'd love to have you both on sometime, because I know with both you guys, it's going to be, the conversation is going to be amazing. Now, you have a podcast, right, that you guys have?
Dr. Ilya has one. It's the Happiness and
Okay.
Kindness podcast. I've jumped on there with him as well. But what we do have right now coming up, and if I may kind of put it,
please.
we have a day or two left in the process. Based on our book, The 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis, we've put together a 30-day challenge. So it's the beginning of the year. What better time than rather just making any sort of New Year's resolution? Why not join us for 30 days? Jump on it. We have a wonderful tool that we're using, a virtual coaching platform that people are able to jump on with us. They'll get daily motivation. They'll get weekly, and every few days they'll get a video. They'll get regular interaction with Dr. Ilya and myself, and we have those coaching moments. They'll get the support of a community that basically will be there taking that journey with them and interacting with others. And then again, try to change those behaviors so we can get off this new year with a whole new set of skills. So 7 keys to navigate any crisis.
Any crisis. I love that. I love that. I want to thank some of the people that are here. We're not done, but I always wanted to, Lonnie, thanks for being here. Barbara, Max, he was my best man at my wedding. He's one of my best friends in the whole world. I think he's in Colombia. So he's all the way from Colombia. Cynthia Simmons, thank you guys for being here. Please like and share this with people, anybody that that might be interested, looking for help, and how they can increase their own personal performance, and how they can become more successful and get the kind of results that they want. And my approach is curiosity. I use curiosity. Dr. Coach Khan uses basically the same thing, but he's not calling it curiosity. He's calling it something else. And then we need these different approaches. We need different people that bring different ways of thinking, different approaches, to the mix, to help different companies and help different people, because you can't have a band with just a bunch of, I play bass. There's my bass right there. But if I have 5 bass players, the band's not going to be too cool. I need a drummer. I need a keyboard player. I need a singer. I need a guitar player. We need all the different people that are doing the different things. Yep. But like you said, when it came to passing the ball, kicking the ball to the other player, if the other players aren't accepting those balls, if they're not ready to take it, and if they're not playing like a team, we're just gonna see failure. Correct.
Yeah. And that's where the performance piece comes in.
That's really cool. So I'm just finishing up a book. I don't know if you've read the Checklist Manifesto.
Oh, I love it.
Book. Yeah, Atul Gawande wrote it, and it was an interesting book. I just kept reading through, and there was some amazing stories about really it's about how hospitals operate. But then at the end, he brought in that whole the flight where the Captain Sully was in the plane out of Manhattan, and he almost he could have 157 people could have died, but nobody died. Very few people were injured, and they were able to land the plane, the jetliner on the Hudson. And what he said in the book is he talks about how Sully was the captain, but there was another pilot. There was the co-pilot that had equal amount of flying time as he did. And he was just as good of a pilot, maybe even a better pilot. And he had his hands on the steering wheel. And at the point that they knew they were in trouble, Captain Sully said, "I'm taking over." And immediately the pilot just said, I don't even remember exactly what he said, but he just boom, it was just done. There was no hesitation. There was no ego. There was nothing in the way of that. And then there was four other people that were in that in the cockpit, right? They all operated as a team. They had to shut the engines down. They had to reboot the engine down. That didn't happen. They had about 3 or 4 minutes to do that. That's a process that takes anywhere from 4 to 6 minutes, but they were able to do that, and they could not repeat that process when they went to do it in simulation. They just could not repeat it. Then they had four stewardesses that had to keep everybody calm, had to go through the process of, put your head between your legs, all that stuff, and then get them out before the plane sunk. And it's just amazing, this amazing type of teamwork that is devoid, that does not have ego in it. And I think that's what we're talking about, to create those teams, to create to create teams and help companies be at that level of where I don't have to bring my ego into it. Maybe my ego gets stroked. Maybe I feel great, all those things, but I don't need to use my ego as a weapon to destroy, to create havoc. Is that kind of something? I'd like you to comment on that.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I mean, think about your reference to music and a band. There's only one front singer.
Yeah.
And if you want to have a successful band, everybody needs to know their role. Everybody needs to embrace their role, and everybody needs to work together to do that. I mean, music is a place where if people aren't working together, that kind of performance shows very quickly if it's not working.
Yeah. We're playing two different songs right here,
Yeah, you can tell pretty quickly. So that's a great example of where, again, everybody has a role to play. And whether it's a sports team, a band, a group that's performing on stage, or a company, it's important for people to understand their role, their place, and how they can support the team while at the same time getting what they need out of that. Because as a bass player, you enjoy playing the bass. You love doing the bass. When you have your moment to shine, you just take it and you just go for it. And at the same time, the rest of the time, that you're the one keeping the rhythm and the beat going for everybody else, and kind of making sure that we have that foundation for the singer to kind of go off, or for the guitar player to kind of do his little thing, or the drummer that's going to help you keep that beat and everything else. So it's important for us to understand, when I work with people, I let them know that my goal is to help them reach theirs. If you help enough people reach their goals, you will reach yours as well. And that's a big part of it. How's that possible? It's because we each have different goals. We're not trampling all over each other. And that's the part of it. We can work together and still get what we need out of that collaboration, out of that relationship, and be happy and still help each other if we have that growth, that abundance mentality. But it comes from asking questions. Ask the questions. Find out what makes people tick.
I love it. And that can be taken into our personal relationships, a relationship when we're at a supermarket, a relationship when we're in a department store, if we're playing on a baseball team, a football team, any type of team, we could just use that and apply that anywhere.
Yeah. Amazing things happen when you ask questions. This amazing thing, people answer. They give you the information that you need. And that's the part of it. You look at it and say, okay, I never knew. Well, why didn't you ask?
Yeah.
And that's the part where simple questions, be curious about things in order to get those answers.
I can't tell you how many coaching conversations I've had where I asked the person I was being coached, so what did your client want? And they couldn't answer, but they knew what they thought the client wanted. Because we always think in sales or in even leadership, we think we know what the person needs. And in a sense, that could be true. And it's probably mostly true that that's what they need. And, you may say, well, this person needs to be more focused. This person needs better morale. Maybe this person needs to take more responsibility, more accountability. This person needs planning. There could be all those different things, and they're probably true. But telling somebody that doesn't necessarily land the way we want to. I don't want someone to tell me, well, you need to be more responsible. I'm like, okay, it just doesn't ever land. It just never lands good, right?
No, the best coaches, the best teachers ask questions. They use a discovery approach, if you will. I draw that from the ancient Greeks, where my heritage is from. And I look at a lot of that. And Aristotle and the great philosophers were always curious, and they were always asking questions about that. and Socrates and all of the great philosophers, they had that discovery method in their toolkit, and that came from being curious, from asking questions, from questioning everything,
I
and
love
that's
it.
part of it.
Yeah,
That's the growth.
absolutely. So I'm gonna have two more questions, then we'll finish up. The first question I want to know is, what books are you reading? Like, what are you, I see all these books, and I'm always reading. And what books are you reading right now?
Well, I cover a couple of friends right now that are also authors that I've been reading, catching up on their books. A dear friend of mine, Andrea Simon, has just published a book called Rethink, and it's all about
Mhm.
really smashing that glass ceiling. And she shares some wonderful examples of women and the success that they've had as leaders in their leadership role and everything that they've done. The other book that I'm reading right now is Indispensable, from a very dear friend of mine by the name of Jim Kerr, who just put that out. And he talks about, if you are a provider, if you have customers, you really want to read this book, because it's one of those where the best thing that you can do is become indispensable for your customers. And that's
I
how you
love
can
that. That's
provide value
brilliant.
and service.
I love that. And then the next question is, you said about you used the phrase the next normal, and I love that. The
Mhm,
next normal, not the new
mhm,
normal, the next normal.
mhm.
And Cal Newport, you kind of quoted something that Cal Newport said. I don't know if you knew that, but you were talking about, he says, we have to, the next level of human beings in the workforce is, you have to have the ability to unlearn and to relearn, like, fast. And
Mhm.
so you talked about that. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. There's a term that called the fourth industrial revolution. We've been moving towards that now, where we are in that knowledge economy. We've been progressing from that and getting into that next revolution where it's all about information. And so much of the work that we do and so much of the exchange that we have is information based. And that's the next industrial revolution. But in order to do that, as people that operate in that environment, we need that ability. Our ability to be in a growth mindset, to learn, unlearn, and relearn is constant. Part of the reason why now we've adapted the way that we train, for example, a lot of the younger generations now in the workforce, is because you ask them, well, where are you going to find that information? For you and I, we may have had to spend half a day in the library indexing and looking at things, picking things up.
Oh
Now
my
they
gosh.
tell me, I don't need to remember that. I got this.
It's-
That's what they tell me. In 30 seconds, I can find the answer.
So this muscle, so what's happening to this muscle, because we're able to get that information so quickly? Are we losing the ability to really develop this muscle?
What we're doing is we are adapting the way we use the muscle. Different parts of our brain now
Hmm.
are being triggered, because now it's much more about, how can I access that information just in time, as we say, when I need it, rather than trying to carry around all of this information that I rarely ever use or I don't need. And that's the part of, we are teaching people how to learn and how to think, rather than loading them up with facts and statistics. Part of that is because the facts are changing. I mean, more and more information is loaded into that proverbial database that we carry around with us. If we are curious, the information that we consume in a week is probably more than our grandparents did in a lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that statistic, that we have more information in a single day than our great grandparents would have had in a whole lifetime. It's
Correct.
just an amazing statistic.
Correct. So that changes the way that we need to use our brain and access things.
So I said I was going to ask you two questions. I actually have another question for you. When you think about the process of flow, struggle, release, flow, and then recovery, and you mentioned recovery, our ability to recover. That's something that I teach. I think recovery is really, really important, and how we recover is really important. And I think that we need to start to, as people, to celebrate the wins that we have. And when we celebrate the wins, it moves us back into flow quicker, because the struggle is less. And then the resistance that goes from our release point to back into flow, is quicker, because we want to get back to that celebration, that excitement.
Yeah.
What do you think is how is your relationship to celebration? I think Cal Newport says it, or maybe Phil Stutz from The Tools. He talks about how celebration is going to be the next motivator. It's like we used to have in the 70s. We came up with this concept, personal motivation, all this stuff. And he's saying that, like, he thinks that the next level of motivation is celebration, because that's pulling us toward, versus having us run away from something. What are your thoughts about that?
Okay, well, let's unpack that for a second, and I
Yeah.
won't go too deep into this. But fundamentally, people are motivated at the core level by three things. They're either going to move towards what they want, they're
Mhm.
going to move away from what they don't want, the consequences, carrot, stick, or they're going to fight like hell to maintain the status quo because
Yes.
that's what serves them. They don't want to lose what they have. So when
Yes.
we tap into those fundamental things as leaders, as people who are trying to coach and train and develop, we use those incentives intrinsically in the way that we do things. We show people you can be successful if you do this.
Yeah.
You're gonna continue to be in pain if you do this. Or
Mhm.
if you want to keep where you are, if you want to maintain that level where you are at the top of your game, you can't stay stagnant. You're going to have to do X, Y, and Z because the world is catching up.
Yeah.
And that's how we drive a lot of that. The success piece, you're always going to get a lot more bang for your buck when you work on the positive side of the brain. When you reinforce the behaviors that you want, when you celebrate the successes, because that's essentially what you're doing, you're reinforcing the behavior that you want. Because success, winning, is as much of a habit as losing. It's a matter of how do you want to be perceived and how do you define that success and the celebration. To
Yeah.
take it one step further, you know, a celebration or a win can come in a lot of different forms. It might
Yes.
be win because I won the game, but it might be a win because you know what, we learned something today.
Yeah.
We learned what not to do, and that in
Yes.
itself is a celebration.
I love that. And for me, what I'm telling people, what I'm trying to teach people is that when you have a win, whether it's a small win, maybe you just picked up the phone and made one phone call today, maybe you closed a sale, but then you look at yourself and you celebrate. What you say is, "That's like me. I'm like the guy that does that." And then you're coming back around, you're more apt to just go, you know what? I don't need the struggle. I don't need the release. You're going to go through it for just, and it's smaller, but you're back into flow a lot quicker.
Yeah, and that's part of what was been missing down. We talk about pandemic fatigue. Part of that is we're missing a lot of those celebrations. A lot of that cycle has been broken. Everything seems like
Mhm.
just a flat thing with a downward curve, and it's just
Yes.
because we're operating in some level of anxiety, stress, and depression right now, and
Yes.
that's not a good place to be. It's like trying to run through the mud because we haven't been able to extricate ourselves and celebrate and kind of feel lighter about things. That's where the next normal piece comes in. And if I may just take 30 seconds on that piece.
Please. Yeah, please.
In ancient Greece, they used to say that you can never cross the same river twice. And the reason for that is because the river has moved on, and so have you. You're not the same
Mm,
person again if you continue to
brilliant.
grow. And that's the piece that we need to understand. That change is constant, it's inevitable. We are constantly growing and changing, and the environment around us is changing as well. So we have to make sure that we keep working towards that. We have to keep embracing that.
Oh, I could unpack that one, and I may could unpack that one for a whole hour. And then what I would say just really quick is that so many human beings, so many of us look to our past to see, am I still like that? Am I still like that? Have I changed? So we're holding on to something that we don't want to be like,
Mhm.
questioning, am I still like that? So our attention is over there, and when we're in, where our attention is that's where energy is going to go, right?
Right.
Versus what you're saying right now, which is, I, I would say it a different way is to say, celebrate what you just did, celebrate, look and see how that moved you forward,
Right.
and then be
So
excited, be grateful, and just move forward.
right, so take that again. So let's move that forward. When we talk about the next normal, I call it the next normal as opposed to the new normal, is because when you focus on the next normal, you realize that after that, there's going to be another next normal and another next normal.
Brilliant.
And
Yes.
that's the
Yes.
difference. People get hung up on, I've lost my old way of doing things. Well, that's gone. That's not coming back. And accepting that is part of the process. Because once you
Yes.
accept that, then you can move forward and your focus goes to the forward piece. And embracing the fact that, you know what, there is nothing more permanent than the temporary. Then right now, this is the next normal. But tomorrow, things may change again. And now all of a sudden, okay, so tomorrow we have a vaccine. Okay. But doesn't mean that we shouldn't wear, for example, our mask again for a little while longer. That may be the next normal. And at some point, we might be able to be totally back to we're not limited to that. But that doesn't mean
Yes.
that another change might not happen that impacts our life. If we are constantly um, planning for the fact that things will change, then we're not caught off guard. We're not so caught flat-footed, if you will. When we work with the kids on the soccer field, I put it this way. One question, one point I make to them: if the ball moves, you move.
I love that. I love that. And if it's, so what I hear you saying is, if it's the new normal, then it is an absolute box that we're living in, this box. The vaccine's out. That's for everybody. Well, it seems like the vaccine has had some side effects. People are, it's not, so, all right. So if it's the next normal, all right, well, that didn't work. Let's figure out let's work on that. Let's keep working on that. Versus no, this is it. This is where we're going to stop. If you died, that's just the way it is. We become closed-minded, and we then excuse things that normally we probably wouldn't excuse.
So we're constantly striving in many ways for this one perfect moment. We try to take a picture, and we think that our life is going to stay that way. It doesn't. It doesn't. There's a story I heard a long time ago from a young man that was doing a pilgrimage up in the Himalayas, and he was seeking this village where he heard that there was this woman that was well over 100 years old, and he was wanted to find out, as part of his pilgrimage, as part of his search, his curiosity, to learn the secret of life. So he finally got to the village there with a Sherpa that he had, who got through, was a translator for him as well. And they got to the village, and they finally showed him where the house was, where the old woman was. And he went there, and he started having a conversation. They shared some tea and everything else. And he asked her, said, "Grandma, what is the secret of life? I mean, I'm seeking balance. I'm trying to get that answer." And so the young translator, the Sherpa, translated for him. And the old woman looked at him with a twinkle in her eye and just smiled and kind of chuckled. And she said something to the Sherpa in her native tongue, and he chuckled as well, and he kind of turned around, and he says, "What?" He says, "Well, clarify a little bit more what you mean." And he says, "Well, I'm seeking balance, balance." And she laughed even more, and she explained it to the young Sherpa, and he says, "In our language, in our culture, this means dead, and that's about the only time that it stays static. As long as you're alive, things are always changing and moving."
I love it. That's very wise. Coach Khan, thank you for hanging out with me. I really, really appreciate it. Let's take a couple minutes to remind everybody how to get a hold of you, what you do. And I'd love for people to reach out to you and use your service and get connected with you and do that 30-day challenge. So let's start with the 30-day challenge and then how people can get a hold of you. So let's do that first.
So the 30-day challenge is out there right now. It's an opportunity to work with myself and Dr. Elia through our virtual coaching platform, work with a wonderful group of people, and learn some of those behaviors, some of those 7 keys to navigate any crisis in your life. So join us. It starts on Monday. Yeah, it starts on Monday. They can we can put that in the notes if you don't mind. I can give that to everybody from that piece. If they want to get a hold of me, I have postings out there on LinkedIn. It's under Coach Khan with a K, not with a C, on purpose. And so they can find me there under Coach Khan, or on my website, freshbizsolutions.com.
I'll put all that information in the description after the show. Coach Khan, what a delight. Thank you very, very much for coming and hanging out. And we definitely got to get, we got to get you back sometime.
Sounds good.
Thanks a lot.